because we're WPSC 88.7 FM, Brave New Radio. Sound good?
Good morning to you, and yes, if you can hear the sound of this voice, that means you're listening to another edition of The Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. We come to you live each Saturday morning from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and then on occasion we may have a Reading Circle doubleheader like we do this morning. That means I have a guest in my 6 o'clock hour and a guest in the 7 o'clock hour, and then we will transition over into the gospel music segment till 9 o'clock, and Barry will follow us with the Naked Brunch at 9 o'clock. So if you've been listening any amount of time, you know we have a ritual and routine where I give you the weather, I read from 2 books, introduce my guests, share some information with you, and our interview will be underway. And my guest is right here in the studio, so I do not have to wait to see if they're going to call in on time, because he is here sitting right before me. So I don't have that nervous anxiety if the phone is going to ring or not. For those of you who tuned in on last Saturday, I do apologize because we did have technical difficulties causing that interview with Dr. Blackburn not to happen, but we will get her rescheduled. And that interview on rigor in the classroom will indeed occur. So we will get back in touch with Dr. Blackburn, get her back scheduled, and the interview will go forth as we had hoped to go forth on last week. But I tell you what, let me go ahead and share the weather with you. Right now we are looking at 56.4 degrees, and it says it feels like 56.4. Actually just went up to 0.5. Well, I'll tell you what, we expect it to go up to a high of 72, a low of 50, sun and clouds mixed. Tonight, mostly cloudy skies. This evening becoming partly cloudy after midnight, and again dropping to a low of 50. Fall is here, folks. Tomorrow, Sunday, intervals of clouds and sunshine. High of 72, low of 57. Expect considerable cloudiness tomorrow night. And then on Monday, 76 as a high, 61 as a low. Mostly cloudy in the morning, then periods of showers later in the day. High of 76, low of 61. Tuesday, isolated thunderstorms in the morning, 30% chance of rain. High of 79, low of 58. A few clouds on Tuesday evening. And then Wednesday, rounding out this forecast, is 72 as a high, 51 as a low, partly cloudy during the day, as well as during the evening. That will give way to even more cloudy skies overnight. That is the weather brought to you right here from the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center. Again, as you know our routine on Saturday mornings, I read from 2 books. One is called What Can Happen When We Pray. The other is called Until Today. And for today, September the 26th, it says, Don't boast. Today's prayer: Loving God, ruler of the universe, thank you for blessing me with life and the opportunity to serve you this day. I don't know all of the ways that you bless me, but I know you will. Help me to share your love with someone today. Get a grip. To most people, you are not irreplaceable. I get a kick out of listening to people who think that every achievement they have made is because of how great they are. They believe they are self-made and that no one helped them get to where they are. How foolish. There is no one who has not relied on someone else's help, whether seen or unseen, to achieve. Whether it is the captain of industry or an elite athlete, somebody gave them a boost at some point. I know that's right. Instead of boasting, be thankful that God provided you when you needed someone the most. Even if you found yourself sleeping on a park bench or in a railroad station, God was working behind the scenes to help you. But you do not have to reach out and inquire of God's will for your life. Once you get on the path to understanding, you will begin to see how God has always been there waiting for you to obey. Don't boast unless it is about how great God has been in your life. And that is very apropos, given that the Pope was just here in New York on yesterday, and I believe he's making his way to Philadelphia today or tomorrow, sometime during that point. But that is an appropriate message based on what the Pope has been sharing as well. For September 26, out of the book Until Today by Iyanla Vanzant, she says, I experience and express the power of trust because I am always prepared to be trusted, or tested rather. Most of us think we have it all together. Wow, again, it lines up with the other book. We believe that we know what we need to know and can call upon that information on a moment's notice. Much to our surprise, when we are unexpectedly confronted with a challenge, the brain is the first thing to go. Try as we may to find our way through the mental jello that was once our brain, the information we need is simply not available at the moment we need it. It is usually in those critical moments, the moments of crisis and panic, that everything we trust and think we believed in will be tested. Unless we are really solid, really sure that we know what we know, we will find ourselves in the sinking sand of doubt and fear. Just to make sure that we know what we know and actually believe what we say we believe, life continues to test us. Yes, it does. If you really want to know how you are doing in the arena of trust, check out your responses to the pop quizzes God gives you. Do you trust that you know the answers, or do you call in sick? Do you put forth your best effort, or do you try to cheat? Do you admit that you don't know the answers and ask for help, or do you act like you know the answers and blame the teacher when it becomes evident that you don't? How you handle the little unexpected surprises that pop up in your life speaks volumes about where you are on the trust continuum. Until today, you may have thought that you had it all together. Just for today, allow the little surprises of life to provide you with some more information that you need to know. Today, I am devoted to facing all tests and being honest about how well prepared I am. That's from the book Until Today by Ian Van Zant. I read from those two books because it sets off a positive tone for the rest of the morning. I've been doing that since I've been on the air. Not proselytizing, not trying to convert anybody, because that's not my job during this time in the show. But it does set a positive vein. And now is the time that we've all been waiting for. I have the opportunity to introduce my guest, who, as I said, is sitting right here. So I'm not waiting on a phone call. He's sitting right here in front of me. He rose early to join me in the studio. He and his friend Patty are sitting right before me. And my guest is William Billy Neumann. He is a professional photographer 24/7, 365. I can attest to that. Any spare time left over is totally devoted to telling the history and preserving the historic character of the Borough of Rutherford, New Jersey. So while photographing CEOs, celebrities, and commercial real estate, he constantly thinks about how to save the Dutch stone house on Meadow Rd, or how to tell the story of the local architecture of Edgar Williams. He graduated from the Drew University Historic Preservation Certification Program and was a 5-time elected chairman of Rutherford's Historic Preservation Commission. He has served on the Boroughs Planning Commission, Downtown Partnership, and organized the First Night Rutherford Festival. He is a member of Bergen County's Historic Preservation Advisory Board and a trustee on the board of directors for Paterson Habitat for Humanity. He is always available to speak about Rutherford history, historic preservation, photography, and habitat for humanity. Welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, none other than Mr. Billy Neumann. Billy, good morning.
Good morning to you, Mark.
All right. Well, first off, thank you for rising, you and Patty coming out this early in the morning to join me in the studio. When I was talking to Billy yesterday, I made the assumption he was going to do the interview by telephone. He said, no, I think I'm going to come on out. So
love to come to Paterson early in the morning.
All right, there you go. And you know what? I saw your Habitat shirt and I read it and I didn't read it. And I didn't realize it was actually our brand. So I know some folks in Paterson Habitat. When we get off the air, we'll share some names. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to share some information with the listening audience for a few seconds. Don't go anywhere. You all know the drill. You are to get on all of your social media sites, and you are to let someone know that Billy Neumann is on the air with me. This is an interview that will be fascinating and interesting. I am sure that they need to wake up if they're not up, and if they are up, tell them to tune in on gobrave.org.
Hey, what's up? Thinking about you. XOXOXO. Want to snuggle. ... JK. Hit me back. You getting these texts? ? We should hang later. I miss you. Holla at ya, boy. Holla back. Holla back. Holla back. Are you at home? Where are you? What are you doing? OMG, you are making me mad. Are you with your ex? You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Relentless, aggressive texting is like sending an angry robot to deliver your message. When does the robot become dangerous? Let us know at that'snotcool.com.
That'snotcool.com.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your basement. There's a pair of overalls that overall you're not so into anymore. A perfectly good laptop that hasn't seen your lap in months. And even more stuff. But still no jobs? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed. And they're the stuff inside your stuff. Even inside that winter coat that moved with you to Phoenix. Our job is to unlock those jobs. And it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover keytar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs. Find your nearest donation center at goodwill.org. A message from Goodwill and the Ad Council.
All right, we are back. Actually, we didn't go anywhere, but we will resume our interview. And as I share with you, my guest is Billy Neumann. And if you can think back a few months ago, I had some guests on there. I think if I'm trying to make sure I'm saying his name correctly, but I know it was Professor Verdicchio, if I'm not mistaken. And he had some students in his class with him, and they had written the history or a historical book concerning Prospect Park, New Jersey. Well, my guest this morning has written one he's authored on his own, and then another that's been co-authored. He's written Revolutionary Bergen County, and that was with Barbara Z. Marchant, as well as Barnett Schechter. And then he's written one on Rutherford, Images of America, on his own in November of 2012. And both of these books are historical insights on Rutherford or Bergen County. So I tell you what, you have them both there. So you brought them with him. Good.
Well, actually, I got two books on Rutherford.
There you go. So we have two on Rutherford. All right. So I'm going to kind of go down the same track that I went with Professor Verdicchio as well as the students in terms of what. All right. Well, let's go back to, because you're a photographer. Mm-hmm. And he said 24/7, 365. As we were walking into the studio, he's literally stopping in the hallways. And he's looking at the pictures. He's looking at the work as we go through. You're a photographer. So where did the writing come from?
Well, I'm a bad speller. So photography was first. And what happened was I actually, believe that photography is magic and that we actually do capture history all the time. And it's something that I've been doing for a long time. It took me a little while to figure out how to actually make money at it, which is I'm a commercial photographer. When people say to me, oh, you must do a lot of great artistic things. Well, I do, but it's more about commercial. And so I like to satisfy the whims of my clients by giving them great images. I was looking at the pictures in here because, William Paterson could be a client.
Absolutely. So in terms of, I laugh when you say I was a bad speller, yet you have a book. Yeah. So, and again, I'm often amused when I have guests that says, well, I don't see myself as a writer, I don't see myself as an author. I said, but you have a book. Yeah. You have a book. How did that all come about? How did you were already doing photography? Where did the idea come in Billy's mind? Hey, I'm going to write a book. Where did that come from?
Yeah, it actually started a long, long time back. A lot of it is about the history of my town, Rutherford, New Jersey. As I say in the first book, which is A Brief History, Rutherford, A Brief History by History Press. My dad was walking me down an avenue one day. This is Union Avenue in our town, the oldest road in Bergen County. And as we were walking along, my dad said to me, at night, you can actually hear the footsteps of the Indians. And I was like, what? Wait, what? And so that was a story. And my dad was telling me a little story, a little parable at that point. And it took me a good long time, probably 20 years or so, to actually realize that story had a lot of facts to it. Where, in fact, that road that went from the Passaic River down to the Hackensack River, very important to Native Americans, in that this was a road that they traveled on every day, and they ate from it, they survived on it, they captured water from it, and it took me a little while to really understand what he was telling me, where in fact that this road was very historically important to Native Americans. At that point, it was another little magic moment where I thought, wow, that's amazing. And then doing a little bit more research, you understand the bigger picture and how our borough grew up, the history of it, the immense, crazy, wonderful, outstanding history of the Borough of Rutherford. But this is a local history, so a lot of people, what actually did happen, I'll confess now, was my neighbor actually said to me, when I was writing, I had been doing a lot of writing about Rutherford for technical reasons, the history of Rutherford. And my neighbor said to me, "There's nothing historic about Rutherford. What are you talking about?" At that point, I said, I better compile this and put it in one place so that people like my neighbor would be able to see this and go, oh, I guess maybe there is a lot of history. And as I got more and more into it, I realized that there is a tremendous amount of history. So, that really was the way it started for me. So
it started from the story about the Indians. Mm-hmm. And then you developed a love for the town, or you always had the love, and then that kind of was like the spark?
Yeah. I actually live in a house that is from the 1870s. It was the anchor house, a farmhouse for a big, tract of land in our borough. I sleep out every night on my porch, unheated porch, from, let's say, March to about November. So I'm really tuned into the landscape. And the history of the place is really kind of centered into the town itself. So a lot of this is it's stuff that I've just lived with forever. I've lived in the same house all my life. My dad lived there all his life, and his dad lived there about half of his life.
So now, Rutherford and East Rutherford.
Yeah.
The same or two different places?
Well, it was one part of a thing called Union Township way back, and Rutherford actually decided that the money that it was a fairly prosperous town in the 1870s, 1880s, and Rutherford decided that their revenue, their money, their taxes, were going to places that they didn't want it to go to. So they decided to split off from Union Township, and they did this by having a popular vote. They kind of sawtooth the borders of their town, cut off a lot of other places, and then just kind of corralled everybody and said, we're the Borough of Rutherford now, which was pretty revolutionary, 1881, September 21st. And what happens is that actually starts off a really interesting thing called boroughitis. Now, most of your listeners, most of the people that live in New Jersey, live under the borough form of government.
Correct.
Rutherford was probably one of the first boroughs to actually take advantage of this interesting new law in the 1870s and become a borough. And at that point, people went, borough? What is that? But okay, so it sounds good. Well, after a little while, in 1894, around that time, boroughitis really took hold. And so you have everybody becoming boroughs. And by the 1920s, pretty much it was over. You couldn't make any more boroughs. There was this, and so when we look at places like New Jersey and say it's home rule, there's a lot of municipalities, there's a lot of school districts, well, you can kind of almost look at Rutherford and go, there's the fault right there. Those guys. So.
And you're right, because growing up in Paterson is the third largest city in the state.
Yeah.
And then you have the Jersey cities and the Newarks. But if you did not travel throughout the state of New Jersey, you would not think the rest of New Jersey is as rural or as boroughized as it is, because you would think the entire state was all city.
Sure.
And that's just the opposite.
Yeah, and we have, the interesting part is if you want to see good rodeo, you want to go down to Exit 3 on the Turnpike and go down to Woodstown, a place called Cowtown. And that is I believe it is the longest continuous rodeo in the United States, in New Jersey.
Now, the word or the name Rutherford itself, is that Indian?
No, it's actually named after John Rutherford, who was the second senator from New Jersey. He served along the time with Washington. Rutherford actually did not, and I got to tell you that the name is a little different because it's Rutherfurd, John Rutherford. And he was a pretty famous guy. He was famous because he owned a lot of land. He was probably the largest landowner in New Jersey at one point. He actually didn't really live in Rutherford, per se, today. He actually lived kind of in Lyndhurst, which is the next borough south of us, or next township, I should say, south of us. And so I think people had a real regard for him and his family, and so that is why our town was named. But of course, our name is Rutherford. So there was a little of a name change. We're not sure exactly how that happened. There's a lot of different suppositions as far as how that could have happened. It could have been that there was another competing land company, the Van Winkles, in our town. The Van Winkles are the oldest real estate company in the United States, and they are at the same place they've always been. They've been doing real estate since people landed here. So the Van Winkles at that point probably had a lot to say about the development of our town. Rutherford came about at September 21st, 1881, during that election for becoming a borough. But before that, it was called, various things. Rutherford Park, Rutherford, or URD, Boiling Spring, Village of Boiling Springs, Sanford Springs. Goes all the way back. We actually, our history really goes all the way back to those Native Americans that were walking on Union Avenue, and that is 1669.
If you've just joined us, my guest this morning is Billy Neumann, and we are talking about the history of the borough of Rutherford. He has actually written 2 books on that and co-authored one on Bergen County. We're going to share some information with you, but you all know the drill. Get on every last one of your social media sites and let someone know, particularly if you happen to be listening and you live in Rutherford, let some of the other Rutherfordites know.
Hear it. Let's hear it from Rutherford.
Let the Rutherfordites know. Let Billy's neighbor know that he or she, was it a he? Was it a guy?
It was a he.
All right,
my
so
oldest friend.
all right, Billy's oldest friend ought to be listening because he know there is a history of Rutherford. I'm going to share some information with you. We are not going anywhere. You are to stay where you are. All I need you to do is text somebody, tweet somebody, Instagram somebody, Facebook somebody, whatever you need to do. Keith Smolin, if you're listening, I did get your Facebook post. And yes, it is the same Billy Neumann, the photographer. Yes, it is the same.
Hey.
The cow says,
I love you.
To a child, it's just something else to play with. Lock it up, because 1.7 million children in the U.S. are living with unlocked and loaded guns. Get involved at ceasefireusa.org.
Hey, need help? Edit a paper or just organize ideas? Feel free to stop by either of our locations. We're at Atrium 128 and Valley Road 3048. For more information, please check out our website at wpunj.edu/Writing Center. Remember, walk-ins are welcome. We look forward to seeing you at the Writing Center.
This is the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. We're with you live each Saturday morning. And when I say live, I do mean live. We are not pre-recorded. We record, but we're not pre-recorded, as my guest is sitting in here live into the studio. And we're talking about his work that he's done from a historical perspective on the borough of Rutherford. And we were chatting while we were off the air about how I know when I go into the larger book retailers, such as a Barnes & Noble, that there's an entire section dedicated to these types of books. And Billy was just sharing with me how he's encouraging, and Professor Verdicchio was doing the same thing when they're encouraging more people to do this type of history. Did you always like history, or was history like
Mark,
a
another
subject
confession. You're bringing me. You sure this isn't Sunday morning? Because I feel like I better be getting down on my knees or something now. No, I was pretty bad as far as history. And, of course, I was a young guy, and I liked the Civil War, all the shooting and stuff like that. But No, I really didn't get it. I certainly didn't get it when my dad was talking to me a lot of it, and I really wish that my dad was around, that I could ask him, because he probably developed into an appreciation of history like I did later in life. And but once I did, I actually have to thank the Borough of Rutherford, because they sent me through Drew University's certification course in historic preservation. So they paid for that, and I am dedicated to pay them 10 times, or if not 100 times, the amount of money that they put into that. So I've been trying to write grants, bring money into the Borough of Rutherford. I am actually probably better known as a historic preservationist, and that is somebody that not only does writing in history, but actually does do the preservation work. It could be hands-on, could be writing grants, it could be advocating. I've stood up in front of planning boards and all kinds of other things and talked about that. But my history, my history chops were not that big until, let's say, about 15,
I can relate to that. History,
Yeah.
I mean, I did the subject because I had to do it in school, but
Yeah.
it wasn't one of my better interests until I started doing history on my family research and turning Ancestry.com.
Genealogy. Yeah.
Right, genealogy. And then I started, this is fun. Then in terms of going back, and you were talking about the Civil War, I did some traveling overseas in Europe. And everything the tour guide would say would always have something to do with World War I, World War II, so forth and so on. So then I started getting interested. Let me start checking out these wars. I knew the Civil War, and I started looking into World War I and World War II. I wanted to kind of understand. So history became, in later time, fascinating for me. When you're doing your research, kind of where do you start, especially now in this technological age, or do you still do it the old-fashioned way of going into the,
very much
the
so.
books?
Well, the thing is that you find, and in genealogy, you go to Bibles, and Bibles will tell you so much about your family or your family you're researching. I actually do some genealogical research, but I'm, more about the buildings and structures and land and things. So a lot of times you're consulting maps. A lot of times you're, going to museums. A lot of times you're going to libraries. A lot of this stuff has not been digitized yet. I just got finished cruising through 3 volumes of fire department logs from my town that go 100 years plus back. And very interesting. These are pretty dry things, beautiful handwriting that you got to kind of remember how cursive is, But a lot of times it is really older documents, things that are still fragile, things that, and I do a lot of historic preservation of documents and photographs.
Are they on microfiche?
Some are microfilm. Some are digitized, and some are just, you got to go to the librarian and say, okay, I've got my gloves,
right,
I've got my white
because you can't
gloves
touch the paper and so
Yeah.
forth. Exactly.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So as you're doing that, are you finding out things that you didn't know? Are you confirming things, a little bit of both? Or what has been one of the more fascinating things that you found out that you didn't know?
Yeah. A lot of times it is really, you start with a story, and then I like to say it's story, history, and historic preservation. So the story could be any number of different things, and I get 1 million people in my town saying, that my house there was a tunnel underneath the river, and it went right underneath my basement, and they used to ship gold underneath, and I'm, well, all right, sure, whatever. And then you start to look, and you go, well, okay, there's an indent in the wall or something, or, well, it's not really a tunnel, but it was here for a reason, and it's probably an artesian well. And then sometimes you find out that that's more fascinating than what the actual story, the beginning story was. There's always something new. It's always something not only just unusual or odd, but it fills in blanks. And, the reality is that we really don't appreciate history until you actually start making the bigger picture happen. You're actually starting to understand that this history of the Civil War has an effect to you, actually has an effect to your town. And you can actually start seeing the ways that this contextualizes to your life. And that's what these books are about in so many ways.
Absolutely. Now, I asked you earlier about the difference between Rutherford and East Rutherford.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't really answer that.
No, you did.
Yeah.
But where I'm going with this question is the whole MetLife Stadium. It used to be called Giant Stadium,
Sure.
I guess whatever we know it as. Does Rutherford claim that as well, or do they get part claim to it, or is that just
strictly
strictly
wave to it and
East
say hello.
Rutherford?
No, that's East Rutherford.
That's just strictly
Definitely
East Rutherford.
Yeah. And East Rutherford, again, it's, we were all part of one big area.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Does the Rutherford ever say, hey, whenever folks mention the Giants or MetLife, they say, hey, that stadium's in our town? Or is that not?
Well, yes, a lot of people make mistakes and say Rutherford because it's easy enough to say.
Exactly.
But East Rutherford, we also get the reverse where people will say, oh, yeah, no, that's East Rutherford. And it's like, no, the birthplace of William Carlos Williams. East Rutherford. No, it's actually Rutherford. It's actually Rutherford. But that's okay. I'm good friends with a terrific preservationist and a councilman in East Rutherford. We actually share a lot of interesting projects, Rutherford and East Rutherford. So, we are separate, but, very much neighbors.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Then that answers what I was looking for.
They actually stole our name. I should say. Because we were at one point called Boiling Spring, and then when we became the Borough of Rutherford, they said, we'll take that name, Boiling Spring. We'll do that for a little while. And then they actually then became the Borough of East Rutherford.
Okay. All right. So now you decide to put this in book format. Now you're officially going through the process in terms of publishing and editing and all that. What was that? Did you know where to start there, or the fact that you worked on the? Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Did you work on the co-project first?
Yes, actually, that was a project where a lot of authors and a lot of writers in Bergen County were asked to contribute to the book Revolutionary Bergen County, Road to Independence. And that was actually a really fun book because I started out doing a project about the Schuyler mines over in North Arlington, and that didn't pan out as the way I thought. And then somebody said, why don't you do some research on Erskine, Robert Erskine, the mine master and map maker of Ringwood. And that was so fascinating because there's really not a lot written about him. We have no pictures of this guy, but he was an extremely important person to not only George Washington, because he made a good majority of the maps that were used in the early part of the Revolutionary War, but he also was one of the people that turned from being an English commerce person of business in England, came here, took over the Ringwood mines, and then became a patriot, and a pretty screamingly important patriot. So the transformation between, a British citizen, someone who actually sided with, the crown, and then became a patriot is a very interesting transformation. So I had a taste of doing that, and then we toured the book a little bit around. We did a lot of signings and things. And about that time, History Press called me up and said, we'd like to talk to you about doing a book about Rutherford. And I said, well, there are a bunch of books out there. And they said, well, yeah, but, we would like you to do one. And I kind of hemmed and hawed for a little while. We talked it over. And then eventually they said, no, we're really serious. We want you to do this. And so I started the research. And the first book, which is called Rutherford, A Brief History, is kind of freeform. It has a lot of area to work through. I started going through the thing, and they said, well, can you give us, we were looking for about 100 and some odd illustrations, pictures, and give us about 25,000 words. And so I started to do that, and by the time I called them back, I was up to about 30 or 40,000. So at that point, they said, okay, you got to slow down here, and you got to figure out where you're going to stop this thing.
So you had your taste, whatever, you co-authored the book, and now you're doing your own. So in terms of, you actually had a publishing house that you were working with, because I know many of my guests self-publish, and they kind of start from soup to nuts. They have to literally go from the beginning. But you kind of had a leg up in that area, so really you were doing more submission as opposed to having to... Yeah,
and I got great guidance from these. This book, the first one... the Brief History, was actually a book that, I would talk to the editors a lot, and they would say, well, think about it this way, and think about it this way. I actually also had a editor that really helped me a lot. Nancy Terhune is a tremendous... she is a genealogist, a wonderful genealogist in Bergen County, and also a terrific historian. And so she actually helped me shape the book up quite a bit. I'm indebted to her terrifically for that. But History Press really put a lot of effort as far as to help us, form it up into something smart. And it's a wonderful book, I have to say. I'm very prideful about it.
Oh, I'm sure. For multiple reasons. One, because you wrote it, but secondly, because it's about the town that you love, or the borough that you love.
Yeah, and it's got a nice context to it. It actually tells the story in a nice way. It's segmented into, it's the kind of book that you could put in the bathroom, pick it up, read a few things, and then put down, and I'll be back to this later.
Absolutely right. Coffee table, bathrooms, all of it. Because that leads to my next question in terms of audience. Is there like a niche audience for that, or who is your target whenever you put that out there?
Yeah. I believe that these books are tremendous tools for historic preservation. And again, I'm very much about being historic preservation. These are tools that actually start it's an introduction for a lot of people in a town to understand what kind of great history they have and what kind of assets are still around. These books have usually a lot of pictures. They usually tell the story of what these pieces of property are, why they're significant, and they do it in a localized way so that, let's say school children can read this book and say, oh, that house was here at the Revolutionary War. That house over there, or this tree, or that cannon, or this fence, any number of different things, or this person, and they went to the same school as me. So that's really a terrific, that's an inducement to really understand history. I think if you get people interested in local history first, they will flower into the next, because we're going to teach them the national history stuff, of course. But contextually, they really need to know that they can go up and touch a building.
Right.
That they can see something and go, yes, this is over 150 years old, and it is in my town, and I can touch it at any time.
If you've just joined us, my guest is Billy Neumann, and we're talking about the history of Rutherford. I am going to share some more information with you, but do as I just did. I just went on my Hootsuite, and I typed in there real quick while Billy was talking. If Billy Neumann is on the air with me, tune in now to gobrave.org, and I am encouraging you to do the same on all of your social media sites. Tell them they particularly, because we can be heard all around the world, but if you are listening in Rutherford, New Jersey, and you have neighbors, tell them to tune in. They just may learn something about their borough.
Hi, my name is Stan Myers, and I'm here at FM 88.7. I do a jazz show called Just a Mood, and if you like the music, anything from Louis to Lester Bowie, I'm your man. That's Sunday afternoons, 3 to 6. Looking to hear from you, okay?
Want to expand your horizons? Want to broaden your mind? Well, listen to the only show of its kind. Listen to The Reading Circle.
We bring you what's going on in the world of reading, in the world of books. Sometimes the book may be from 20, 30 years ago, because the thing about books, they are timeless, particularly if there's a good message. And then there are times when we do books that are hot off the press, that were just released.
Listen to The Reading Circle every Saturday morning from 6 a.m.
The Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley.
Only on WP 88.7 FM.
My guest this morning is Billy Neumann, and he's written several books on the history of Rutherford and co-authored one on the history of Bergen County. And we're just talking as we go through about that history of Rutherford. Did you meet any resistance from anyone once anyone knew that you were working on a history of the town? Because if I'm not mistaken, when I interviewed the last set of folks who did this type of a book, if I remember correctly, they shared with me how they had met some resistance from some folks. Did you meet any resistance from anybody?
No, not really. Rutherford's a funny town because we really all know each other, and we really are all in each other's business. So there's not a lot of secrets. And a lot of our history has been documented already. And a lot of us kind of share that history. We all remember William Carlos Williams and his son. And these were doctors. These are people in our town. William Carlos Williams could be thought of as somewhat controversial at times. His life was a fairly free thing, but he was a terrific guy. He was a pretty important doctor for our town. So there was a lot of help from the Van Winkles, the Williams family. These are all stories that we get to tell a lot of. We have a lot of pride in our town, so it's not bad when people say, I want to tell you about this little stable that is behind my house. I want you to take a look at it. Why don't you come over? We'll have some coffee. I'll show you where the old, whatever. And that's so wonderful because it is that volunteering, people's personal stories that we get a lot of. And we didn't really see, any resistance.
Rutherford is relatively close to New York, at least New York City, a little bit closer than where we are right now. I mean,
we're like halfway.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, proximity-wise, we're close to New York. You're talking 12, 15 miles, but Rutherford's even closer.
Yeah.
Any historical ties to that, to New York,
Oh,
the
very
Lincoln
much
Tunnel, and so forth and so on?
We are on a little pearl necklace right here between Paterson, Rutherford, and New York, and that is the biggest difference in our town. Meaning, when the railroad came through, and the railroad was called the Paterson Hudson River Railroad, 1831, incorporated here in Paterson. It went from these mills where there was manufacturing to the money in New York City. And, of course, it went over to the Hudson River, Paterson Hudson River Railroad. But, of course, it passed through Rutherford. And Rutherford was the first stop in Bergen County on this historic railroad. These are very early railroads, some of the earliest railroads in the United States. So when people say to me, "Oh, you've lived here so long and you've seen us, all these great changes in Rutherford," the only change that we've ever had in my town, in my opinion, is that when this railroad came through. So the linking between Paterson to New York City was extremely important. And our beautiful railroad station reflects that. It's just an absolutely architecturally wonderful structure. And it says, this is an important town, this is an important stop, enjoy it, and move on.
Absolutely. I keep going back to you co-authoring the first book because that gave you a taste. Now, it's one thing to see your name along with 2 or 3 other authors.
And great authors, too.
Yes, but it's another thing to see your name as the only name on the book. What was that like for you whenever the books came off the press and it says by William Neumann, you got that in your hand?
Well, it was an arduous process up until the very last point. We ended up, I think, finishing it up just about Halloween. And at that point, I was like, I am so done with this. I am just so done. I want to go to sleep and forget about this. And then about 2 months later, it was about a month later, I got the first shipment. And opening up the box, you look at it and you go, oh, this is so nice.
No, it really is. I ask most of my guests, not all of my guests, that question because it really is like giving birth to a child.
Yeah.
And it really, and I was there when my wife had the children. I was there. I literally saw my children coming into the world.
Right.
And the pains and the contractions and the this.
Your
that,
pains and contractions?
I didn't have. Well, I did have sympathy pains, but the pains and the contractions,
the screaming
all of
and the
that,
yelling.
right? All of that is forgotten once the child gets. And it's the same thing whenever you birth a project. I felt the exact same way when the CDs came. When the box came in the mail, and I'm sitting there literally jumping around, and my wife thought I was crazy because I'm literally jumping around the house, waving the CD in the air like, because there it is, The Wrinkle Rag by Marc Medley. Yeah. And I have a box of 100 of these things sitting there. Yeah. But it is a surreal feeling to actually have a project that came through you that is now manifested, that is going to be in the hands of someone else.
Yeah, right.
And so you're right. It is like painstaking to get it done. And then once it's there, though, you forget all about that. So have you ever had anybody, and this will lead you because Patty's sitting here, and Patty shared with us when we were off the air that she was using his book prior to meeting him. Have you ever had anybody come up to you whenever they recognize the name and say, or either you at a book signing or whatever? What is that like for you?
Yeah, I have a lot of different worlds that I'm in. The commercial photography thing is one thing, and I've had clients that go, you know what, Rutherford, there's a guy that wrote a book about, his name is Billy Neumann, and that would be me.
Yeah, you're talking to him, one and the same, yes.
So it's a lot of it is really how you feel about the book and how these books are really interesting books because they're entrees for writers that maybe this is possibly the first time that they're writing something serious and long form, and so I think they're terrific ways to start. I am a better speller now, I'm actually, I can spell pretty good now. I can even spell my name now. And, when I was a kid, I didn't know how to spell William because everybody called me Billy or Bill or Willie or Weil or whatever. And 18, they said, your name is William. And I was like, what is it? Where do you get that from? I don't know how to spell that. So it's helped me a lot, and I think it helps a lot of writers that start out with these books to actually codify what they want to say about their town,
right,
and also make it into a structure that is digestible for a lot of different levels, reading levels, particularly.
In terms of, and this is to me, it's a natural fit. That's why when people are multifaceted or multi-talented. Your photography. Did you do did you do the photos in there?
Oh yeah. The front. This is radio, but front one here and this back one here, and this is an iconic little picture that I've done for the borough on calendars and things like that. It's actually our borough architrave on our borough hall. It says Borough of Rutherford. It's very cute. Magnolia trees and everything, and I'm really interested in pictures, so I do collect a lot of the historic photographs of Rutherford. I do a lot of preservation of these photographs. I really think it's important to be able to tell these stories in illustrations. The second book I did is pretty much, this is an Arcadia book, and these are the books that you normally see.
That's the ones I see, right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
In Barnes & Noble
right.
and everything else.
Because they have a whole section on that.
Yeah. I'll tell you a couple secrets about the book. The book, these Arcadia books always end on page 128.
And there's a reason for that, I'm assuming?
Because these are formula books. These are books that actually they say, this is the way you're going to write your book. You will do it this way. And like being the smart guy that I was, I wrote a book already. And, and then, Arcadia calls up and said, oh, we'd like you to write a book for us.
Right.
And I was like, well, I did one for History Press. And they said, yeah, we want you to write one for us. And I was like, I don't think so. So they said, we're going to ship you the materials. You look it over, think about it.
Right.
And they kept on bugging me. And then eventually I said, all right. I know how to write a book. I'm good, So I immediately started writing my own little book. And, of course, about a month in, nothing was fitting. Everything was wrong, And so I called them up and said, I don't understand what's going on. They go, are you following our instructions? And I said, well, they said, follow the instructions. Fit the pictures in, because this is an illustrated book,
right?
Quite a bit different. A lot of pictures,
and they're yours.
Yeah,
they're your pictures.
Well, some of them are. Some of them are original pictures of mine. Some of them are actually, historic pictures that I've collected. And pictures that people have given me too.
Yeah, I'm asking because actually I would have been surprised if you said none of these photos are him. Being a photographer,
yeah.
Because that's another thing for people who write books. They have to get illustrators or photographers. But you can kind of do your own thing. You could do the writing and the photography.
Yes, a lot of it is stuff. Like I'm really a big guy for Edgar Williams. Edgar is the brother of William Carlos Williams, so I have access to a lot of materials from his family and from his archives and things like that. So that's one channel that I've used, meaning there are other places. Our library is tremendous in Rutherford. We have a museum in Rutherford, a lot of places, and we have tremendous amount of people that just say, sure, you want to take a look at all the pictures I have? This unbelievable front cover picture was from a friend of mine. That is from a commercial standpoint, you can't make a better picture than that. But it is so beautiful because it actually says, this is Rutherford, and this is what we do.
Right. And it also gives the historical.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at the coloration, the picture itself, the way the font is up there. That tells you right off the bat.
Yeah, you're going to know right away that this
is.
Yeah. So, these Images of America books, the Arcadia books, are, nice formula books. And they're great. They're easy to go into.
We were talking a couple of minutes ago. You said you wanted to encourage other people to write these type of books.
Sure.
What advice or encouragement do you give someone to write that type of a book?
Well, to first feel the passion to do it, and that's not really what happened with me. But after I was going into it, I really did feel it, and that's the point where it started to generate a lot of text. These are, you're doing 20, 30,000 words. That could be a long form for people, and that could be a breeze in the park for a lot of other people. But you have to really try and do good research, solid facts, recheck, go to primary sources. I actually do workshops on how to write these books. So a lot of it is to understand what is the main points you want to put together? What do you want to talk about in your town? And, and stretch out to people. You got to go to people. I was going to people through social media and saying, I'd like to see any pictures you have, even if you think they're goofy, nothing. And that's exactly how I got this front cover. Had another picture, and this woman came up and said, you know what, maybe you want to take a look at this because it's a picture of, my husband in a car in front of Barron's Drugs. And it is so iconic to Rutherford that as soon as I saw it, I said, I don't care. That's the cover. You can't stop me.
That's the one. That's right.
Yeah.
What does that do for town or borough pride?
Well, it's interesting because I get a lot of people that come out now and tell me their story. And, all these stories are interesting on different levels, different reasons. So a lot of people, when they read the books, they do collect into the history. They really feel that part of their history is part of this town's history. So, and, you're constantly talking about people in these books anyway. So many times people will say, I never knew that about Dr. Williams, or I didn't understand why that World War I monument was like that, or, the Borough Hall was a school at one point? Wow. And then they start thinking, they thought, well, my grandfather went there. Oh, wait a second. And then they go and they look up for, pictures, and I get a call, 9 o'clock at night. You know what? I just found some pictures. You want to come over and take a look at them? Yeah, sure. I got nothing to do. So yeah, it's a very collective consciousness for these books in these towns.
But that's good because you kind of got to my next question, which is what has been your feedback? How's the feedback been from folks who've read the book or seen the book or what have you? What do you hear?
I haven't made too many mistakes, so it hasn't been a lot of you don't understand things.
I know, that was not the case.
You didn't spell that. I actually spelled things, and I actually have a copy at home in my bathroom that I actually make, corrections in as I go along. But no, it's been terrific. And I've done signings. I've had the pleasure of being able to give away books, get them into the schools, into the libraries. Right now, I have a hardcover rebinder that is actually saying, we're going to start rebinding some of these books. Would you like to do that? And that way you can then put them in a library and hope they're going to stay there. These are normally softcover, pliable books, so they do get beaten up. I've already replaced one in our library.
Now, does the books and the photography, do they support each other?
Well, the books don't really pay as much as the photography.
Well, I don't mean from a paper. Well, not from a paper perspective, but from the standpoint of you getting your name out there, or like I said, to me, it's a natural fit to be writing and doing your own photography. Yeah. But do you ever? I guess where you kind of said earlier, some folks say, "Hey, this guy and Billy Neumann, one and the same." Do you ever have one drives the other?
It's fairly divergent. Audiences like my commercial photography. Okay. A lot of these guys may not know very much, and really some of them are real estate developers. They don't want to know about historic preservation. That looks like an impediment to them. However, at times I can actually say to them, look, there's tax credits. I understand historic preservation. Right. If you need to know about this, let me help you with it. And sometimes you can turn a developer into saying, I see this, and our pro forma works out that we can make money by doing this with respect to historic preservation. So sometimes these things cross over.
Now, so when you were talking about Van Winkle, the realtor, do you have, say, for example, copies of those in various real estate agencies that might be sitting on the table when folks come into the shop or what have you?
Yes and no. Some of the books now are a little bit long out there, so I've actually not been the retailer I should be, not going out there and actually pushing the book a lot. I usually do that around Christmas time, and a lot of times when people and I actually do a lot of reunions too. Okay. So I photograph reunions, and sometimes the reunions ask me to get up and talk about the history of Rutherford. These are high school reunions and things. And so I also, have the books for sale there. A lot of times with these books, you get a good support in the beginning. You get a lot of distribution. Everything works really well. The publishing is great and everything. And then the publishers kind of say, all right, you know better about how to make this work than we do, so go at it. Then some people do, and some people go, I think I'm good.
Book signings. You've done local book signings in the area?
Oh, yeah. All over the place. At libraries, at stores. Trying to think of the weirdest. Well, I've done a lot of, Barnes & Nobles. Right. Two or three Barnes & Nobles. The guys that are close to Rutherford. These don't have, and although they have a pretty interesting reach. I know that some people over in France have bought them because they live there now. They're from Rutherford. But they have a fairly local reach. But then when now, using Facebook and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we get a lot of people that go.
Going back to the Prospect Park book, their history was Dutch.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of people overseas that actually became interested in it because it had the Dutch connection. Sure. Is there a foreign or an overseas connection for the history of Rutherford?
Yeah, we've always had a fairly diverse culture there, and our Dutch ancestry goes back to, all the way back to, the very early Dutch families. The Kips, the Van Winkels, the Yarens families, people like that, we can really transfer our understanding about what they are in the United States to what they were in other countries,
We're down to the last couple of minutes, or 3 or 4 minutes. I always give that as an open mic to the guest in terms of promotion. And you can say anything with the exception of a dollar amount. But in terms of any upcoming book signings, appearances, how to get in touch with you, whether your websites or how to get in touch with you for the photography, this is your moment. The mic is yours to promote.
Oh, Mark, thank you so much. Yeah, for the books themselves, I actually am an administrator for a couple of the more popular Facebook pages in Rutherford. One is called If You're From Rutherford, New Jersey, If. And it's terrific because we got about like 2,700 people that are very active, sometimes controversial, sometimes funny, sometimes, very serious. We just had a really interesting couple weeks in that 3 people, older people, passed away in our town. Calvin Spann, who was a Tuskegee airman.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful man. Loved Calvin dearly, and he passed away. And
I have an autographed picture of him.
Isn't it?
I worked with his niece.
Oh,
niece
there you
or
go.
His cousin, or one of the other.
Yeah,
yes.
Sure. A family that has been in our town forever. And Calvin is really, will always be a Rutherfordian. We were able to celebrate him back here to Rutherford. I came back, and now he's interned close by. My neighbor, Jim Norton, who was a councilman in my town. And so these things are all celebrated. We had Ray Heller, our musician and a person who conducted our Rutherford community band. And these are all people that have been celebrated on this, this Rutherford page. There's a few of them. I grew up in Rutherford, a few of these. I try and keep that all together. My website is Neumann Photo, and that's NEUMANNPHOTO.com. That's the commercial stuff.
You heard him spell that, right?
Yeah, right. Of there's a couple of Facebook pages that are specific to these books, and so social media is something I try and do. The photography, you can always call me, find out where I am. I am really good to do all kinds of photography. I have a very diverse, weird clientele, and
I'm sure.
so the books are terrific. I have them out there. And I do these reunions a lot. I think we got 2 more reunions this year that, not only do I do the photography and sell the books, but I sweep up at the end of the night.
There you go. A true Renaissance man.
There you go.
Yes, indeed. All right, we're down to the end of one more time, the titles of all the books, Billy, all of them. And so, folks, if you're listening, you can get the books. I know they're available on Amazon because that's where I pulled up his bio from, but he just gave you the website where you can go to, and the name of the books are
Rutherford, A Brief History, and that was from History Press. It's the white cover book. It's a beautiful little book. And Rutherford, Images of America, which is the Arcadia book.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this hour of the Reading Circle. I am now sitting here on anticipatory tiptoe waiting for the phone to ring for my 7 o'clock guest, but that anxiety is always there, and if something does go awry, there is a plan B for this morning, unlike last week where I did have a plan B, but I think I was so aggravated with things not going the way it was supposed to go that I just kind of put back on our automatic audio. This week I won't do that. Had such a fun time this morning with Billy and Patty. Patty was here. She did not want to speak on the microphone, but she's been here supporting Billy, as well as I love her facial expressions and the smile and the energy that I'm getting from her whenever as we're speaking. And so we've had a blast this morning. My next guest up is Lisa Wang. Lisa, I'm going to have to look on there to see what it is, but to make sure, because I know it's a hyphenated name, so I want to make sure I get the names right. But I'm waiting for Lisa to call in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to let the music play as I let Billy and Patty out of the studio. But again, the books are on Rutherford. If you are from Rutherford, if you have lived in Rutherford, if you are near Rutherford, even if you are in East Rutherford, you want to get a copy of these books. There you go. So Billy may wind up writing one for East Rutherford. And so we have that there, but I thank you two so much. Again, it's one thing to rise early to be on the phone. It's another thing to rise early to travel here, because it's only about maybe a 10-minute ride for me, if that, to get here. But to come here from Rutherford was at least 15 to 20, maybe even a half hour. Even though there's no traffic
I'm over here all the time.
Okay, so we had a blast. Get the books. They are historical. You have the opportunity to find out exactly, because most of us really don't know how our cities and towns came into being. And there is some fascinating stuff. So, all right, have a great day to both of you. I'm going to walk you out, and then hopefully the phone doesn't ring while I'm out the door with you, and then we'll be on into our next segment.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.